Irrigation in your garden, very, very important. To have a garden that produces well, that's easy to work in, that where your plants are going to be thriving and you're going to be able to direct seed and be able to get things to germinate. Having easy and plentiful water is incredibly important. So you have to find a way to bring water out to your garden. Either it's close by the house or it's on the patio, maybe you have a raised bed. As long as you can get a hose out there, you're going to be okay. And now there's two ways, well actually three, of getting the water to the plants, right? One is just manually where you use a watering can or you use a hose with a wand. And that's going to work only on a small garden. So if you have just a raised bed, a small raised bed, that's going to work just fine. And you'll just water with a watering can and there's really no problem with that. As you get a little bigger, you have to move to something that has less intervention by you, where you can put down a lot more water. And in that case, there's really going to be two, which is overhead, and then there's going to be drip. This is overhead, where it's just a sprinkler, and one sprinkler can cover a pretty big garden. A sprinkler like this should be able to cover a garden that's 25 feet by 25 feet. And the advantage to an overhead sprinkler is it puts down a lot of water fast, so you can water your entire garden in half an hour, 45 minutes, and get a nice deep soak. And that's very important when you're irrigating, is that you want something that gives a really deep soaking to the soil, that doesn't just water the surface, but gets really deep down. Because it's always better to water heavily once than water a little bit each day. And that's what this does, is it's going to water nice and heavily quick. The other method is drip, and that's where you have drip tape running down your beds, and and you have to run on low pressure. So if you only have low pressure and you're not able to get a sprinkler to go, which you should, normal home or apartment pressure should be able to operate one of these no problems. But if you're using drip is a very slow way of irrigating. So it doesn't really work for germinating seed or for getting things done quickly. They have to be left on for a very long time for that drip to finally make its way through the soil. Where it does make sense is anywhere that you're growing crops under cover. It's absolute necessity. Where you have low pressure, those are really the best places to use them. I don't think they're ideal for out in the garden. I think a sprinkler is going to be a much better situation. You certainly can do it, but I do find they get in the way. They're much more work in the winter. You're going to have to figure out something to do with them to either get them out of the way. Mice can chew on them, put holes in them, and then you have to re-deal with them. So this is a much better choice in the field. Now the last thing is, how regularly should you water? Well, it's whenever things are dry. You never want them to dry out too much. Because remember when I was talking about this life in the soil, that life needs moisture. So to keep it active and keep things happening in the soil and your organic matter continuing to break down in the soil, you need warmth, and you need moisture, and you need air. And if you let things completely dry out, they're going to die and things aren't going to happen. So you want to keep a constant level of moisture. Now the top may dry out, the top ½ inch, but you don't want the entire soil to dry out down where the roots are. So that means at least once a week of very, very heavy watering, right? And so that's about 2 inches of water each week. Now the 2 inches doesn't really mean anything. It's what's more important is that you check and you look in your soil and you dig down and you make sure that it's moist as you go down. And you'll see that if it dries out, you haven't watered heavily enough. Okay? So once a week, very heavily. If it's very dry out, dry wind, you may want to do that twice a week. right? And especially after you plant. So every time you plant, you need to water in your seedlings. That's going to guarantee that they're going to live. They need to be watered in immediately. So as soon as you plant them, you want to step away, turn on your irrigation, let them water in for a good 15 minutes to half an hour so that you can guarantee that they're going to survive. Inside of this little tunnel, it's not going to rain. It's going to be very hard to do overhead. Plus, we don't want to do overhead for tomatoes because they don't like to be wet. So the best thing to do is drip. Drip is cheap and easy to set up. And I'm going to give you pointers and I'm going to show you exactly how to do it so that you'll be successful at it. All right, so the first thing you need is a main line, right? And this is just a 3/4 inch black pipe, specially made for drip. You don't want the thick water pipe. You'll never get that into it. You need something to pop a little hole in it. And here we have just, it's a little punch that punches a hole so that this can get started. It's a little smaller so that when it goes in, it makes a watertight seal. And then we have the connector, right? So you have a main line that comes out, and that's going to come from wherever your hydrant is out to your tunnel or your garden. You can take a hose from the hydrant to the beginning of the main line, but this can't be a hose because you got to be able to pop these holes in it to get the connector in there. So you bring your main line out, you get it set, make it a good set to staple it. And you don't even have to buy these. I mean, you can make them out of coat hangers if you want. It's not a big deal. And we got to terminate the main line. And I'm going to show you how to do that, right? They actually sell things that terminate it, but you don't need to do that. All you want to do is just cut a piece off the end. Okay, so you cut a piece off the end, just fold it over, okay? And then you're going to squeeze it. This might take a little strength to do it. There you go. All right, so once you terminate the end, right, then you're going to punch holes, right? And you just want to punch it in one spot and don't stop until you get it in, right? You can turn it, right, and get that hole. It's better to work in warm weather. The pipe is more flexible. And then it's bigger, so it takes a little force to get it in. Then you're going to hear a snap, and it's in, right? And you can see that the head of it has passed the edge of the pipe, and so that means that you're inside the pipe, and it's going to be a nice seal. And now we're going to put on the piece of drip tape. Right, you just want to open it up, put it over the end, right? Make sure this is turned all the way down so that you can get it as far on as possible. So that's going to get it the seal. Then hold it in place as you turn the clamp back upwards, right? It gives you a place to hold on to as you tighten it, and then you're good. All right, let me take a moment to talk about how many per bed. 3 is really normal for vegetables. You can get away with 2 because I'm just planting tomatoes along here. If I was planting basil along the edge, I'd probably want to do 3, 4. Spacing in the row, 8-inch emitters, 10-inch emitters, both of those are fine. I think they're going to be no problem. It's really going to depend on how much water you have. Less water you have, you don't want to put a lot of emitters because you want to make sure that your water makes it to the end of the bed, right? You don't want it dripping at the beginning and not dripping at the end. So that's really the only difference there. So right now I'm doing 3 on these beds, which this is going to be celery and that's going to be basil. And that's going to work out perfectly. And then I have 2 on the tomatoes. You can always add 1. It's not a big deal. Okay, come to the end. I'm going to show you how to terminate the drip tape. All right, so what you do is you just want to cut, just like with the main line, you just want to cut off a little bit of the tape. Then you want to fold it. This one you want to fold at least twice, and then fold it that way. Then take that little piece of drip tape, open it up, and slide it over, and make sure it's fully on so that it doesn't push it off. Okay? And then you can staple these two to keep them straight. Hey babe, you want to put a staple on?
Yeah.
Push it down. Great. Here's our main line coming back from the tunnel or from your garden. And there's going to be one more connector, and that's just connecting the main line on and locking it down. And then it has a hose, female threaded bit at the end that can just go onto your hydrant. You can also add a timer at this point, so there'll be a timer between your hydrant and the main line. Another thing you may want to add if you have high pressure, and that's the pressure reducer. Here I have it set at 10 psi. So if you have like 30 pounds per pressure in your house, then this will step it down to 10. You may want to even go further. Drip tape runs on very low pressure. So if you have high pressure going to it, it's going to force off your end pieces, it's going to force off fittings, and it's just not going to work. It's going to leak all over the place. So that's why you need a pressure reduction. All right, so we're going to turn it on.